Hello. Today I'm talking with Allison Pollard. We talked about coactive coaching, how to scale yourself, and not being in pep talk mood.
I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello everyone, and hello. With me I have Allison. Good evening.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And I said evening, but of course it's evening on my side. It's, let's say, about 15 minutes after 8 o'clock in the evening. What's the time on your side?
It's about 2:15 in the afternoon.
So we have a lot of time zone differences,
Yeah.
and let's bring you on screen as well on where you are. And so I am in Ghent in Belgium, and let's move to Dallas because that's where you are. And of course, thanks to Google, we're flying rather fast.
Right,
And,
yeah.
And of course, it's not the exact location. Where were you? You just said it before.
I'm in Carrollton, so on the top side of the screen there towards the left.
Yeah, okay. So that should be there somewhere. Carrollton, here it
Yep.
is. Yes. So that's that brings us already immediately. Very nice. Let's hide the screen again. Okay, and then here you're back.
Yep.
So that's. But I still see a little bit of lag. I hope that the lag is not recording here. But anyway, Allison, welcome here. Before we jump into the questions, could you tell us a little bit on what you want people to know about you? Who you are?
What I want people to know about me. So I've been transitioning my work. I feel like every one of us, it's always an evolution in your career of like, who are you focused on? What kinds of problems do you solve? And nowadays I'm focused on IT and software managers and working directly with them and their bosses really, but helping them be more effective in how they manage up. So that they're able to get the things that they need from their boss, whether that's a director or a VP, a CTO, how they're supporting people through change. Because I think we all agree there's a lot of changes happening in organizations at any given time. And managers need to be able to support developers, QA testers, business analysts, product managers, right? Everyone through the change process. And then certainly how managers and technology leaders are making time for strategic work. I think all of us struggle at times. I know I've felt the pain of having meeting after meeting after meeting and then feeling like I don't have time to think and try to get ahead of anything. So those are the kinds of problems that I'm working with my clients on right now.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And well, let's jump immediately into that first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah, it doesn't come up very often in conversation, but I joined a professional engineering fraternity when I was in college. The name of it is Theta Tau. I've recently been inducted into the Alumni Hall of Fame, which is a huge honor. But I actually think it was so important for me and my growth and my development because when I was in college, I felt shy. I wasn't sure about like approaching people. I was studying computer science and math and English. And like with such a varied schedule, I didn't have the same classmates in like everything that I was doing. I would see a couple people in like my English courses, and I'd see a very different set of people in my computer science courses. So when I was invited to join and learn more about Theta Tau, it was a pretty big deal for me. And I joined as a junior in college, and it really felt like the first time that I could say I like really belonged to an organization. Like I really felt like I had found a group of people that I wanted to hang out with, that we had a vision of how we could, do activities for professional development and community service on our campus here in Texas. And I got to know so many people in the organization across not only my chapter, but other chapters as well, that it just felt like I mattered. Like I suddenly had a voice, like I could suddenly be a leader and make a difference.
Yeah, that sounds like something that can have a real influence on you.
Yeah.
And was there something that you did in between? Because you said in the beginning it was with multiple kind of people, and then
Well, it's funny because so I went to school in Dallas. I've grown up in the Dallas area. I grew up in a different suburb from where I am now. So when I went to college, I had part of my life was there on the campus, and part of my life was actually off campus. I still had friends in the area from high school that went to different universities. So I would meet up with them, still socialize and stay in touch with them. I was also an avid swing dancer. And so I was going to Lindy Hop and swing dance events on a pretty regular basis, which is another interesting tie-in. I met a lot of computer programmers at the time that were, in their like 20s, 30s, and what have you. But for me, it was again, like feeling like I didn't have a single place where I felt like I belonged. I felt like there were many different sides of me, and that like I had to like find the environment and like the group of people for like the mood that I was in, or like very specific projects. And it was, I don't know, just like a lot of context switching, and still kind of like guarding myself, of like who gets to see like what parts of me, and like what does that kind of look like for different relationships, different friendships across the board. So for me to suddenly like find an organization that was pretty varied in its activities, and the members were very open to like supporting one another. It's like we all know how hard it is getting through engineering courses and those advanced math courses. Sometimes you really do need to like look at one of your peers and go, am I the only one that's like really struggling to understand this? And then you might realize, oh wow, it's not just me. It was actually like the professor's handwriting was so bad, I was misinterpreting. No wonder I didn't understand the formulas. I had the wrong the wrong symbols that I thought they were writing. But it was like a really good experience for me to suddenly like have a group that kind of like forced me out of my shell socially, but then gave me a better sense of like purpose and meaning of, again, like giving back to the community through some community service events and having some professional development where I got to suddenly connect with, people that were already working in the industry, but get a better picture of like, what are the kinds of things that you work on? And like, what does that do? Or like, what's the engineering behind it? And learn some really cool things I might not have been exposed to otherwise, or I might not have sought out on my own.
So that's really cool. And when did you realize that influence on you? Because that what you say, it was different than it was before when you were younger.
Yeah.
Is that something that you now see at the current part in your life, or did you realize that already then?
I could tell I was like really into the organization, and I was, even though I had a lot of schoolwork on my plate with 3 degrees that I was focused on, I made time for that organization, and I really put a lot of effort into getting to know members and attending events and even traveling to some of the other chapters to get to know people there. And I kept finding, it's like, oh my gosh, like you're always giving me more than I'm expecting. Like I'm always learning more about myself as a leader, or seeing a clearer picture of like things that we could do that I wouldn't have known how to do on my own, like how to run say an egg drop competition. Like I wouldn't have known, like, who do I need to go to on the campus in order for us to talk about having a group of students build contraptions that we're going to put eggs in and then drop them off of a multi-story building, or in our case, a multi-story parking garage, in order to see, like, how were their engineering skills? Were they able to protect the egg, or is there now yolk like all over the lawn? But there's a lot of things that you have to consider in running events or like recruiting members. You know, how do you get people to show up to community service events? What kinds of things are attractive and appealing to folks? How do you help motivate that individual that, again, they might see themselves as not as sure, not as a leader, and you actually recognize their strengths and you can have them contribute more and more over time because you're able to help them see the leader that they are, that they didn't know existed. So I knew I was like really pretty nerdy about this organization, kind of like all in from a membership standpoint. You know, very quickly moved into a leadership role for my chapter, and actually got named as the outstanding student member for my chapter and for the fraternity within, I think, the first 2 years that I had been a member. So it was a really big recognition that my efforts and the things I had been doing on my campus and encouraging other people to do, it had such a big impact. So I recognized early on that it was helping me to develop as a leader and growing my skills as a communicator, as a facilitator, as like a manager and a supporter of other people.
And so you reckon, because I find it incredible that at that age you already see the links that you're learning as a leader, because I remember when I was studying, I was also participating in many different things, but I didn't always realize that it was about leadership, helping other people doing stuff. So that sounds very mature already at that age.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably tell, like, this is why I went into project management, right? It's like it was such an easy transition, given the experiences I was having in college. It actually took me a while after I started my career to realize that not everyone had those kinds of experiences, that not everyone had developed some of those skills. Like, I took them for granted. I thought, well, everyone should know how to run an event. Like, how hard is that? I've done it lots and lots of times. Or how to facilitate a meeting effectively. It still catches me every now and then where I will see people attempt some of those things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why was that so bumpy? Or like, why was that so hard for you? And I have to remember that I just had a lot of exposure and a lot of practice in things, and not everyone has had those opportunities.
Right. And you had them, so that was really helpful for you at that time. And then later, of course.
Yeah.
Let's move to that next question. If you and somehow my software, it's really strange today. The software doesn't work like I thought it should work, but okay. So let's jump to that second question. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, what would have become of you?
It's funny, when I was looking at jobs, as I was nearing graduation, there was certainly the IT side, right? Maybe I go be a developer, or like technical writing was a strong interest of, like, how can I help with the communication between technical and business people? But then there was also this other side of, I was very interested in nonprofit work, and maybe being like a grant writer, helping nonprofits, get the funding that they need for some of the programming that they do. So I've always been sort of aware of and like attracted to that side of, like, how are we making society a bit better, or strengthening our communities, or improving individuals' lives through meaningful resources and connections and things like that. And again, ability to like appeal to people of, what does this mean for our community? Why might you want to support it financially or contribute as a volunteer? What kind of support is going to be the most beneficial for that organization to really fulfill its purpose?
Yeah, I find it incredible when you say all of this for things at a very young age. I would say it feels like. Is that something that you always had, even when there was little Allison?
No. No, that's a good question. No, little Allison, like very little Allison, thought she was going to be an artist or a ballerina. At one point, maybe an interior decorator, because the idea of suddenly getting to see like books of like wallpaper and like color swatches for paint and picking out furniture and stuff, like all that seemed really cool and exciting. So it really wasn't until college where I was, again, getting exposed to the technology, like software side of things, but also because I was studying English literature and writing papers on a regular basis, that I loved communication. And actually, even me studying computer science, like I love programming languages for the syntax, for the way that it communicates between the person and the machine, and then possibly to other people. So I was just fascinated by how do we connect ideas and people through these different means of communication, and getting more familiar with some of the nonprofits and organizations that were around here in Dallas. And actually, I did like a small, almost like internship with one where they sent me to a grant writing workshop. So I got to learn more about, how does an organization, how does a nonprofit, need to present itself, and the programming, the events, the activities, the resources that they want to produce, so that, the government might fund it, or a grant, or like some other kind of an organization can, provide that financial support for it to either come to life and like launch initially, or for it to be sustained over time and be able to show results year after year.
Wow. Okay, that's again very interesting and moving in all kinds of directions. I really like that. I really like that. Let's move already to the third question. What do you consider your biggest challenge, or at least the biggest challenge that you want to share openly on the internet?
Right. Yeah. I want to share on the internet with all the people. I find networking, like with people, a bit of a challenge. And the thing that usually gets stuck in my head that I always have to get over is the like dread of small talk. That, I really stress out about the idea of like meeting a bunch of strangers and feeling like I'm having the same conversation over and over of like, hi, so where are you from? And what do you do? Cool. I don't know what to do with that. Like, is it something that we have an interesting connection? Like, oh, we do similar kind of work, or like I might know someone that would be interested in meeting you based on what you said, or vice versa. Like, I find it hard to know, like, so what's this relationship potentially going to be, or is this it? Like, is it just right now, like, cool, it's great to have met you, and I hope you also enjoy the food or the event, or like whatever it is that we're here for that's happening, and I will probably not remember you in like 15 minutes from now. Like, I'm not sure if you'll come to mind when I might be able to help you, or when you might be able to support me in something. Like, it feels like everything at networking events, like if they're not really like well conceived in some ways, it just stays like so surface level that I'm like, I don't know what to do at surface level, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it definitely makes sense. And do you have ways to work around it, or how do you deal with that? Because
Well, I mean, it really is kind of like psyching myself up, like beforehand a bit. Because I remind myself, like, I don't need to meet everyone in the room by any means. Of like, just go and talk to like 3 people, and it could be 3 people at the same time, right? Like a little group. Like I'm fine with that. Know what, kind of like a reminder to myself of thinking about that, like, how am I going to answer that first question of like, so what do you do, or like, what brought you here, like the classic openers in those kinds of conversations. Not to where I've got like a well-rehearsed elevator pitch the way that I'm probably supposed to, but I'm also not stumbling completely over my own introduction, and making an embarrassment of myself. So I think the other thing that I sometimes have to tell myself is just like, wear comfortable shoes. I've like made that mistake recently. I went to a group. I had to psych myself up. Like, all right, you're going to drive 20 minutes. You're going to go to this group you haven't been to for a long time. It's all networking all night. I wanted to present myself well. So I was like, I'm going to wear heels. I look really nice. I feel comfortable in this. And I had to park on the streets, walk a little ways into the building, and then it's all concrete floors, and no place to sit. So I realized within like 30, 40 minutes, my feet are starting to hurt. And then there were a bunch of speeches, and I was like, oh my God, I really can't handle this much longer. So I kind of snuck out like right then. That for me, I find like, if I'm not physically comfortable in the clothes that I'm wearing, and especially the shoes that I'm wearing, it's going to be very difficult for me to like stay present in meeting people, and putting on I don't know, like a positive sort of like reflection of myself.
Yeah, I think it's incredible how much how much we feel at ease is impacting how we feel then for the rest of the evening. And indeed,
Yeah.
if we have to stand all day, and if it's hurting your body, then of course I would also feel less comfortable, and then makes it even a lot harder to talk with people. I'm always amazed at indeed how women sometimes make themselves harder, because heels, we all know that they hurt a lot too. I don't think, I understand why women want to wear them, but at the same time, I know that most of them hate it because it hurts especially if you have to do it all day, and standing all day. And yeah, it's interesting. You're not the first that I've seen or I've seen it already at network events, where people might jump in with nice heels, and then a little bit later, change just to make sure that they feel much more comfortable in the rest of the evening. And it's incredible how we still keep doing that. And again, there is no judgment on why people want to do that. But at the same time, I think if you have to be standing all day with people,
well, and this is what goes through my head. If I'm running an event of some kind, and especially if it's an organization that's putting on a networking event, I think about like, so someone had to psych themselves up. They had to make a trip over here. They might not know anyone. It's been a long day, if it's the evening like this one was. Like, how are we going to make them feel welcome? How are we going to help them like meet other people, feel like they belong, ensure that they like have a positive experience of this? And so it's even like, like when it's been a long day, wouldn't it be nice if there were like a couple little areas where you could just like sit for a few minutes? Or maybe even telling people a bit more in advance about like the dress code. So that was part of the reason I stressed out, was like, I remember this group tends to dress up more, but I also haven't been in a really long time, and I don't know what networking looks like for them. It's like, I assume some people are like myself and working from home, and I tend not to dress up a whole lot when I'm working from home, dressing more for comfort and going to a coffee shop perhaps in the afternoon. But if I'm in an office, I might be a little bit more dressed up. So I think there's like so many different things that you could consider, if you're running an event, in terms of like, how do we make this accessible for everyone, and how do we make sure that it's a positive experience for people?
Indeed, that is so true. That again, depending, if people don't think how it will be for people, especially evening events. And there I see a lot of difference if an event is organized by a group of males or by a group where you have at least one or multiple women in there. They seem to be thinking much more, and not just for the women, also for myself. I noticed that it is much more comfortable if I can sit. It's much more comfortable for if people think about that. That's I recognize that. Now, the second part of that question was, why is that a good thing for you?
I mean, it certainly keeps me humble on some level, but I think it is like a reminder to myself of like I should spend a moment and consider, like, what are my goals? Why would I want to go to a networking event? Who am I hoping to meet? What value might I be able to provide someone else? So like all those nerves where I'm like, am I sure? Do I really want to do this? Like, should I sign up or not? It forces me to, really have a think and get clearer on like, does this one make sense? Or am I trying to push myself into, I don't know, being like someone else, or trying to do too much? Do I feel like I need to go to like every meetup, for the sake of going to every meetup? What's going to really help me and help me to meet other people and support them too?
Yeah, I think that is indeed a good thing. Because you're on the other side and you recognize that really helps. I think much more. I hope much more people who organize events or do whatever, because a workshop in a way, or a training or a meeting is an event, even if it's at a small level. So that sometimes is important as well. So thank you for sharing this. Yeah. Let's move to that next question, because I've noticed again, with everything that you say, there is a lot of passion, there is a lot of drive. What drives you?
It's so funny because like I don't think of myself as like having drive necessarily. But I do think about direction. Like there's always like a direction. Like I want to be clear on like where I'm trying to go, and completely,
but if you try to
completely
go
open
somewhere,
on like what that ends up looking like.
But if you try to go somewhere, there should be some drive as well. I mean,
you
can't go if you're standing still.
True. I guess it's something about the word drive that it starts to get closer to like hustling, which I know like I've really been focused like the last couple of years of like, I will not hustle. I will not work all the hours. I will not try to do everything myself. I will not try to like push for results, right away. For me, it's been like an intentional slowing down and trying to be a bit smarter about how I'm doing my work, and more importantly, like how I'm living my life. Because for a number of years, if you actually met me at a networking event, and we got past a little bit of the small talk, you might have been like, oh, like, what do you do for fun? I was like, well, I go to conferences and I love like speaking and giving presentations, and like I go to meetups, and for a while I ran the meetup group here in Dallas. Like my answer, or like, oh, I love to read books. I'm reading a lot of leadership development and management type books. Like any answer I gave, people were like, oh, that sounds like more work. Like that doesn't sound like fun at all. Like I'm glad you like it, but like, oof,
But for you, it was fun or not?
For me, it was energizing. It was exciting. That's where I was learning. That's where I was connecting with people. Like a number of my like closest friends were people that I've met through some of those meetup groups and through work. And truly, like, we can actually talk about things beyond work in those friendships. But I also recognized, particularly during the pandemic, that it would actually be very, very nice to have some friendships that are completely outside of the kind of work that I do. And I realized that some of those had really atrophied over time. That because I had been traveling for events so often, I hadn't spent as much time with people in my local community. And especially my husband and I, we had moved from one suburb to another back in 2019. So for a while, I was I really didn't know any of my neighbors or anyone that's, within, say, 10 minutes of where I live. So for me to actually say, okay, I don't want to continue to have the answer of so my life is work and work-like things. To actually say, I want to have work and then I want to have other stuff was kind of a big deal. And, first it was just, I want to spend more time with my husband, more quality time. We have more meals at home. We go to musicals on a regular basis. Then it was, how do I build new friendships? So I've actually joined a book club in my neighborhood. It's a group of women that meet every month, and they read a lot of historical fiction, which is not a genre that appealed to me all that often, but I'm growing to enjoy it. So I'm reading things that I wouldn't have otherwise read, and I'm meeting people I might not have met otherwise, but trying to be more intentional with that drive, right? Of what's the well-rounded life that I want to have, and how do I have more roots where I am?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a little bit. I understand why you have that feeling for that word drive.
Mm-hmm.
How would you call it?
That's a good question. You'd think I'd be I don't know, ready with a word there, and I'm really not. Because I know, if people try to ask me about what's your purpose, I always feel like that just sounds kind of weird, too big, too lofty in some ways. I think if you ask what's giving your life meaning now, it probably gets you a very different answer than the kind of thing that you are looking for with what drives you.
Yeah, you don't have to have a word.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because I suddenly think back to some coworkers of mine. We were working at a client together, and it was a pretty tough, consulting engagement. There was a lot of political type things happening with that organization internally after I think an acquisition merger. So just major culture clashes happening, and it was pretty tough on us as consultants. And one of my peers looked at me one day. He's like, Allison, you've been doing this for quite a while, and you've been pretty successful. How do you do it? What gets you up in the morning? And he's looking for that pep talk. And I was not in pep talk mode whatsoever. For me, it was a very literal of well, my alarm goes off in the morning. I probably press snooze a couple times because I'm not a morning person. And then I get out of bed and I take a shower and I get ready for work. And then I just go to work because I don't know what else I would do for my day. If I was going to play hooky, no one else is available. Everyone else is at work, or what is there to do? For me, it was actually in this, I'm a little bit on autopilot, or I have such a strong routine of I go to work because it's a work day. And that's just thing that happens. I go to work, and that happened to be the work at that point, was working with that client, with those consultants, and with those teams and those leaders there. And I think sometimes we all find ourselves in that kind of mode, that when someone asks us what drives you, or what's your what do you see as your life purpose, or what gets you out of bed in the morning, you're just kind of like dumbfounded, and you're like, well, I haven't thought about it for a minute. Maybe that's probably a good wake up call. It's probably like a good sort of like jostle of like, maybe I do need to take a step back and reflect. Like what do I want my life to be about? Or is it a legacy creation kind of thing? Or just what kinds of experiences are you wanting for yourself now? Or like what's going to fulfill you the most, in the short term or long term, for this point in your life? Like, I think there's a lot of different things you could look at and a lot of different answers you could have.
Yeah, I like that. It's indeed a way of looking at things. Like you say, the getting up. It sounds like, okay, you don't need to call it very big things, but at the same time it's like, okay, that's what I like to do. Without that, it also feels like that you don't have a Monday morning feeling like, oh, I dread to go to work or something like that. It's just like, okay, this feels natural to me. That's how it sounds to me. And then of course, indeed, sometimes we have people who don't have that others that try to convince and try to find the stories, but for you don't need these stories, and because of that's hard to explain. That's a little
because like there are definitely some folks, and like I think of like a friend of mine where it's like everything is awesome, like I love my job, and when you love your job you never feel like you're working a day in your life, and I'm just like I can't, like what like I can't see that for myself. I can't buy into that. Like that's just not it's not believable to me on some level. Like I get where that might work for other people, but for me, it just does not resonate at all. And I don't mean that to be then like, oh, I'm it's called work for a reason kind of person. I'm like, that's gross too, to me on some level. But it is just I go to work, I solve problems, I work with other people. I help connect ideas, and like it's going to be challenging. I like challenging, but I also know that sometimes it is like I am dreading going to work. That is probably the sign of like I need a vacation. Like I need to really disconnect. I need something that helps me to put some stuff into perspective and be able to really evaluate how am I supporting other people and being of service, and is that really working for them, and is it really working for me at that point? There are times that you just kind of find yourself as part of the routine, or like going through the motions of stuff, and you're like, man, this was really working a while ago, and now the results might not be as strong, or actually it feels like I'm just extra, like they've got this, they should be able to handle it on their own. It's probably time for me to move on as a consultant.
Right. So okay, so that it feels really like a little bit in the middle of both of these things, like not on the forefront, like so I really like that. It's a nice balance. Let's move to that next question. What is for you your biggest achievement? And the question that I've noticed when I do this with other people is that this is basically your moment to brag and to be really proud. Is that easy for you to brag?
No. And largely because like I tend to focus on like what's not working, and then getting it to where it functions or it thrives, it succeeds, whatever. And then I just move on. So I tend not to pay attention to achievements, or I just kind of go like, oh yeah, like put another point on the scoreboard, still playing in the game, like still moving forward, doing something. So it sometimes has to, I don't know, be something where another person like points it out in my life and goes like, that's a big deal. Or the ones that like it I don't know, it's like so blatantly obvious, like even I can't ignore it anymore. But for me, like my biggest achievement, I would say, is actually starting up the mentorship program through Women in Agile. And it's one, like when I started it, I just thought, oh my gosh, like I have gotten so much amazing mentorship from other women in the Agile community. And I'm so grateful that I, had met these women and built up relationships with them and like felt so at ease asking them for advice, different parts of my journey, and getting such amazing like wisdom from them and things that I could use. And I had realized that not everyone has that access. Not everyone has that same ease of just asking for help. That they haven't had the opportunity to meet some folks and build up those relationships. And so I had talked to Leslie Morse, president of Women in Agile. I said, I'd love to start a mentorship program. I would love to use the Women in Agile community to help connect women to one another, to provide that kind of relationship and support to one another. And so I never really thought about like how quickly we would grow or like what all it would look like. It was more, again, like I have a certain direction, and I'm just gonna kind of like go down this path and see what happens. And within 4 years, it has grown to be a global program. So we really and truly have had women from the United States, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia. We've had people spanning time zone differences, connecting like mentors and mentees, learning different culture, things about that, those relationships too. But I think for me, the biggest part of it has been like growing a volunteer team, really shaping a program that's unique, where we're focused on adding value to the mentors, and that the mentors are women who are leaders in their respective companies. So they're actually not consultants and they're not trainers. They're not people trying to sell Agile services. They're like those internal influencers or maybe even decision makers in product companies, technology companies, airlines, like you name it, kind of companies. And that we're pairing them with individual women for 6 months to provide resources, advice, be a sounding board. Sometimes it's the like reassurance that you need of like, man, I had this like big lofty goal for my career, and suddenly there's been a big change at my organization and I'm having to like work through that on a daily basis. And I don't know how to keep focusing on my goal. Having someone to talk to about that and partly recognize like it's completely normal to feel sidetracked because you did just get sidetracked. Like that's a very real reaction to the situation that you find yourself in. And it might be, let's talk about putting your goal on pause and better, addressing the thing that you're going through now, because that might be the priority. Or maybe it's time management and like, what does it mean to try and still make some progress on your goal? But building a program from scratch and seeing the impact that it can have across the world and supporting women in their careers has been absolutely amazing.
I can imagine, and definitely something to be proud of, to indeed see as a big achievement. Really wonderful, and I also love the backstory about it. Okay, the fact that you reached out to the whole organization reached out, and then indeed seeing, and I think this is a kind of a story about the whole concept of women in agile, because I have the feeling that also started out as an idea and then grew bigger and bigger, and then somebody else has another idea, and there is a blog, there is a podcast, there is the mentorship now, there is the conferences, there is so many different kind of things, and really wonderful what's happening there. That's and really nice to hear your part of that story.
Thank you.
Because it's of course the whole Women in Agile is not just your story, but your part is really important in that part as well. So That's the nice thing. Let's move to that next question. What do you have a personal agility tip to share?
I was like thinking about this. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure like what to say. Because I feel like there is like one part of personal agility that it's unconventional. I'll say it that way. But thinking about like, how do we share our achievements, or like, how do we describe to others like what we do and like what we have done? I feel like sometimes in order for us to remain in a position where we can change directions, or where we're able to continue to like flow in our careers, we need to give ourselves more credit for the things that we've achieved. And so, kind of playing off the like WIA mentorship program as an example, right? Like I told you, like I've started a program that is global. Like I'm telling you, I'm giving you a sense of like the impact, like, and it has helped women, in these like 6-month relationships. People have found new jobs, they've gotten promotions, they've made it through really tough organizational changes, even dealing with a lot of like personal and life things, that are happening at any given time. And I know we have some blog posts on the Women in Agile website where you can really see in other people's words, what their experiences were. So like the results are there. It's for me to then have to point to it. And when I can say, here's what I did and some of the results, it opens up that potential of like, oh, I might know someone that would be interested in that group, or I think there's an interesting person in my network that you might want to connect with because they're trying to do something similar with another organization, or any number of directions that could go. But instead, if I had actually just talked about my achievement of like, well, I started up a mentorship program and we run events for mentors. You're like, well, okay, that's so. I know the activity. I know some of the effort that you're putting into it. Not really sure what to do with that, but maybe I introduce you to like other event organizers or something. That might be that may or may not be like the kind of connection that would be beneficial to me. Or I could just be like, oh yeah, I'm involved in like Women in Agile, and I actually give myself like no credit, like beyond that. So I think like part of my personal agility, like as we think about, how do we get better at like organizing our time or like getting stuff done, it's also thinking about like what's the story that you're going to be able to tell from it afterwards, like what's the achievement, or like what's the impact. In some ways it almost in my head like ends up connecting with like objectives and key results, in the sense of like, what's the thing you're going to be able to say at the end of the quarter that you had an impact towards? Like, what was the objective? Like, what's that sort of like audacious, inspiring, sort of story that you're going to be able to tell? And I think sometimes we just like lose sense of that when we're focused on personal agility, is like, how do I get more stuff done? Or just like personal productivity, which again ends up connecting to me at more of that, like, if I just hustle, if I can just send enough emails and reply to enough people, like good things will happen. Or if I sit in enough Zoom meetings, then it's been a productive day. And you're like, well, no, that's not what that is. So thinking about like, what are the achievements that you would love to have, or better for me, like recognizing the ones that you have already met, and how do you talk about them?
I like that in a way that you're you focus again on some of the outcomes, and making sure that when you talk with other people, that indeed they know that part. There's so many people, both men and women, who undervalue themselves and then say, oh, I don't want to talk about myself, people should just see what I achieve. But at the same time, they don't mention it themselves. And a friend of mine, Jim McCarthy, once said that if you're an artist, you have to sign your work. painters, they do sign, they put their name on the work, and we should do the same thing in all kind of things that we're doing. Like, okay, because if I'm not proud of what I'm doing, who else will be? Then it's very hard for other people to be proud of it. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, there really is like this strong belief that like, well, my work is going to speak for itself, and it's really not true. And because I think, especially as I think back to like when I was in a director role, like there's so much going on day to day. It's hard to keep up with, what are other people's achievements, and, who might be ready for that next project or next opportunity. That it behooves all of us to make sure that we're saying, pretty clearly, here's what I've done, and here's been some of the results of that. Because being able to shape our own story, I think helps it to resonate and make sure that it gets out there, versus relying on our boss or other people to like connect the dots or to like see, why our activities and why our work was like so meaningful.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that idea. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it might not be the most traditional tip, but that's exactly why I'm asking
Or you
this
can set up a
question.
personal Kanban, like that's cool too.
No, but that's exactly why I don't give a lot of context when sometimes people ask me what do you mean, what do you kind of think, and it's like I on purpose don't want to give that context, because then it gives very broader ideas, just like this one. So that's why I like about that answer. Let's move to that next question. What have you learned about remote working?
Oh my gosh. I was actually like just joking about this with my colleague Paul Tevis earlier. He and I are big fans of Wes Kao and her newsletter that she puts out. And she had one recently about hopping on a call and how you shouldn't ask people to hop on a call. You should probably spend more time getting clear on your thoughts of what you need from this person and why. And if you can send that information to them, you might even be able to avoid the call itself. That for me, it was like this big aha moment where it's like, oh my God, that's what I've been learning working remotely, is just how lazy some of my communications have gotten, or like how heavily I would lean towards like, well, it's in a Zoom, it's in a meeting, like we're going to have a synchronous conversation around this. That some of that is still needed, but not to the breadth and depth that I had been doing it. Because I think pretty early on when I started working remotely, some of the meetings that I was getting invited to, is like, well, yeah, there's kind of a standing agenda, but you don't really know like the exact topics until you like show up. You just know sort of like general theme, or like what the flow of the meeting is going to be. So it started to feel like I was getting almost like you're a contestant on a game show of like, so today for the brainstorming part of the meeting, the brainstorming topic is, like, how do we improve our leadership practices? And I'm like, great. So with like zero time, zero preparation, very low context, let me pull out really good ideas from my brain, go. And that just wasn't happening after a while. I was like, I can't just be brilliant on demand. Like it doesn't show up just because I like join the Zoom meeting sometimes. That is like, starting to tell people like, could you tell me a little bit more in advance? Like, can you tell me like what the question is that you have, or like what things you're hoping to get advice on, or like what problems we want to solve together, or at least just tell me, hey, I have some news to share with you, that I'm like, I can show up in like ready to listen to news. But there was so little context, like there was so little information being put out there, again, in like agendas or other messages, that it just felt like I was having to like respond in the moment and then keep trying to do that gracefully, hour 7, hour 8, maybe even hour 9 of the day. Like that's just not realistic. So Paul and I, because we work so closely together, we've gotten a bit better of like, okay, when does it actually make sense to hop on a call? And like, when do we have standing meetings, and how do we have clear agendas for them? And then like, what does the rest of our communication look like? That, especially because I'm in Texas and he's in California, and that's a 2-hour time difference. We want to be respectful of like, hey, I would like you to be able to eat lunch at the time that you would like to eat lunch. And I don't want to be, forcing you to get up too early, or, I don't want to be having to stay on too late and delaying dinner with my husband. So what's the written communication that needs to happen between us that just happens like throughout the day? Or actually a week or 2 ago, I experimented with like, I can record a video. So I still get to like just be able to talk something out, but send him the recording, and, he can respond to it at his convenience. So I think recognizing that remote work really and truly like should not resemble all of the things that we were doing in offices together. And I actually think some of the things that I was doing in an office, like that also should have changed. Now that I can like look back on it with some objectivity, but recognizing like, this kind of like synchronous communication and being able to see each other on videos and having sound and like very rich. Sometimes that really is like the best thing. But I mean, even here, like you've sent me questions in advance. You've helped me prepare. Like it wasn't just like, come on down, Allison Pollard, we're going to play a game and ask you questions on the spot. And I hope you have good ideas, or I hope you have good answers, or like all of it's going to go out to the internet. So like, good luck. But
And
in
still,
order to,
I'm asking extra questions. So does that bother?
right, yeah, I know. There's still an element of I could win a prize or something. But but really and truly, like if we're wanting to value the relationships that we have, with people that we work with, and like make the best use of like their skills, their strengths, their perspectives. I think we on some level like owe it to one another to like set each other up for success, and be able to, again, do a little bit of homework in advance, and like letting people know, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's where I think you fit into that. And I'd like for us to be able to work on that together. And maybe that's on a call, maybe that's just through emails or something else.
Yeah, I really like that, because somehow the person that sends out an invitation for a call or whatever, he or she knows what's going on, but the receiver end, they have no idea. It's like, will I get fired? Will I get a promotion? Will I get a lot more work? Will you quit? What's happening? We totally don't know. And yeah, just even if it's like, okay, do you have some time today because I want to go over project X or Y, is already way better than let's hop on a call.
Right, exactly.
And should I worry? Is that you heard something is going wrong, or is it because you want to praise me? And okay, am I? Yeah. Do I need to go to the toilet before you talk with me? Because will it indeed be 5 minutes, or will it be a 3-hour call? Because we want to talk strategic things. Yeah, that all these.
I get that. Like, I remember my manager many years ago. Like, he texted me in the afternoon and is like, "Hey, do you have time to talk?" And it's like I don't hear from him all that often. So to suddenly get a text from my manager like, "Hey, do you have time to talk?" Like, it's the instant like, "Oh God, like what's wrong? Like, how much trouble am I in? Like, what have I done recently that I could suddenly get fired? I don't know. And so I texted him back and said, well, I have a meeting that starts in about 10 minutes. He's like, oh yeah, no, that's enough time. And I'm like, okay. And he calls me right then. He goes, hey, I wanted to let you know, like, you got that promotion. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I'm so stunned right now. I was like, it's a good thing. Like, I appreciate it. And like, that was not something I was expecting at that time. And like a friend of mine laughed at me because he saw me afterwards. He's like, what was that? And I was like, yeah, I just found out like I got promoted. And he's like, and that was your reaction? Like you take good news really badly. But I was like, I don't expect to get a call like saying congratulations when I've told you I have a meeting in 10 minutes. And like,
Right.
like that doesn't help me be in the right mindset now for the meeting that I have in like 10 minutes, right? Of like, I'm just trying, I don't have time to tell my husband. I don't have time to do a little happy dance. Like, now I'm trying to be like, wait, what do I, again, like, what's the meeting that's about to happen? Who's about to show up? What do I need to do? What do I need to say? That it was like a context switch that even for good news can be still like kind of disruptive in someone's day.
Yeah, and that a lot of people don't realize that, and then indeed you might get the reaction like your friend, like, oh, but that's a very strange reaction. Yeah, maybe I wasn't prepared for it. Maybe you didn't even want a promotion, because I also know people that were told like, oh, you got a promotion. Oh, I never asked for a promotion. Maybe the promotion doesn't come at the right moment in my life, because I don't know. I have a friend who a family member was very ill, and at that time was offered a promotion, and this friend declined because he said like, no, at this moment I know that my life will go into shambles in the next year because of the whole whole taking care of that person. I will keep working. I don't need extra holidays, but don't ask me to go the extra mile to take on a promotion. And his boss was really surprised, because like, oh, but you never told. Okay, true, I never told you that because I didn't want to bother you with that. But yes, I
mean, like when you have a situation, you're like, I've got it under control. Like I know what's expected of me. I know how to deliver on that. I'm not needing any additional support, like have any special requests to make. Like I'm good. And then like, hey, we're gonna change your job and your job expectations, and you're gonna have to like take on some new things. Be like, that's too much. I can't.
Exactly. And the strange thing for his boss was on top that person wanted that promotion a year or two earlier, but at this particular part said, well, I'm going to decline, and that's really bad, because I know probably it will have to wait another 5 years for having a promotion or whatever, but that is where my life is, and that's fine. But that was a very, from what I wasn't there, I wasn't working at that company, but that was a very awkward conversation that my friend had to have with his boss. Because both of them, they didn't share up front. The boss doesn't share up front like, okay, you might be getting the promotion now, and he didn't share like, okay, last week something happened in my family. So again, there's no blame on that, but it became awkward at that point.
Yeah, it's funny like how quickly things can get awkward between like manager and employee. And again, that's like why I focus on like helping managers. Like you want your employees to know where they stand at any given time. Your employees want to know where they stand at any given time in their job, right? Like that if you suddenly text them out of the blue, they have a better inclination of like, this is probably the good news about the promotion that we've been talking about recently, not, oh God, did I do something wrong? How could I possibly get fired today? Like your brain goes to like all kinds of outlandish, stories it can tell itself, of like you sent an email and forgot a comma. I don't know. Like, but most of us, like you would like have these one-on-one conversations, and then time passes and it's hard to like stay current, like stay in sync between manager and employee of like, so how are things looking towards that, or what's going on in my life that might impede that or make that difficult, and like keeping it relevant. So it's not just like, hey, like what's going on in your personal life? How's your family doing? I hope I don't step on anything uncomfortable or like make this awkward between us where you're like volunteering information out of nowhere or sharing too much. But also knowing like, yeah, life has an impact on someone's work and their focus and things, and knowing like, so if this is the kind of work that might be coming up ahead, what kind of support might you need? Like, what would be helpful for you? Or what should I be aware of like, oh, that's around the time that I'm going to be helping a friend move, or like I might have some doctor's appointments coming up. They're all, normal, my annual, checkups and stuff, but just, I'm going to be in and out a little bit more than usual, right? It's just like keeping one another aware, of how things are going.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, well, and like you said also halfway through this conversation, that it's as much true for in person as remote. But remote, it everything becomes bigger remote. The good things, the bad things, everything becomes bigger. And then yeah, if you don't have that good organization or project management skills, whatever you want to call it, but decency to give extra information, then it makes things a lot more awkward in a lot of these conversations. Let's move to that next question. What's a book that you have read that you want to talk about?
I've read some good historical fiction recently, but I was actually going to share probably more of interest to your audience. The Engineering Leader by Cate Hudson. Yep,
That's
you've
this
got
one?
it there.
Exactly.
Yep, I've got my copy here. I keep it handy. I loved it, and I thought it was so amazing. Cate is apparently trained in coactive coaching, which I've also gone through and gotten my certification in. So I found myself like recognizing some things from coactive about how she described, how to approach, being a manager and like working with your employees on some of their goals and things that I really appreciated. But I have so many pages that I've been like taking to like dog earing, like folding down pages when I find something interesting. So there's like quite a few in here. I was like, oh, I want to go back to that. Like, ooh, that was pretty cool. That I hadn't thought about that before.
So that's a compelling case to read that book.
Yeah.
And it's called The Engineering Leader. Is it also interesting for like say Scrum Masters and coaches, or is
I
it
think so. I think so. Yeah, because it really is sort of this thought of like, how do you scale yourself? And I found like part of the premise, like when you're talking about like a manager in particular, the idea that most of us are like influenced by like, well, you know what? I've had managers in the past, and who I don't want to be like. I don't want to be like that person that I had, early on in my career, that they micromanaged me. So I'm not going to be a micromanager. I'm not going to do the things that my micromanaging manager did to me. So most of us are informed by like what we don't want, or like what bad looks like, and that there's really not a sense of like, what is good? Like what's the thing that we do hope to be? And we sort of like constrain ourselves and just try to like walk around of like, well, as long as I'm not bad, then I must be pretty good. And so the activities or like the thoughts in the book of, again, like, how are you spending some of your time? Are you able to like, think a bit strategically? What are you talking about? Or like, how are you approaching conversations with people like one-on-one? I think there's a lot that would still translate to like Scrum Masters and coaches. Knowing that we would talk to team members one-on-one, or there are some things that we need to do when we're kind of managing up or managing outside the team, some of those like stakeholder conversations of, how do people need to put in requests for the team and have them do work on something, and like, how does that get funneled through a process, or who do they need to talk to, or when they have complaints. I feel like people always have complaints, like, how do we address those? So I feel like there's just some like really good, things to like, again, be inspired by in the book. When you think about like, how are you doing your job? How are you relating to other people? And what are some, I don't know, different perspectives to look at it through to try and be more impactful and not just, feel like you're busy, every day, all week.
Yeah, definitely things that are interesting. I love how you say that most people know what is bad, and we try to
Yeah.
do the opposite, but the opposite of bad doesn't mean good. Right? So
Yeah.
it might be okay, of course, what we know or what we consider bad is something good to avoid. That I
Mhm.
definitely think is a good idea, but that's not just good enough
Right.
for something.
Yeah, I mean,
so
like a number of us, like when we tell ourselves, like, well, I don't want to be a micromanager. I want to empower people, and so I'm gonna like tell them outcomes. I'm gonna give them a lot of like freedom or autonomy to figure things out. Really like let people lean into their strengths. It means that sometimes we're coming across as vague, where folks are like, I have no idea if you're asking me to do something, if you're trying to have me take on like a leadership role of a thing, or you're just like giving a recommendation, or like a little bit of advice that I may or may not apply. Like when it's not clear what we're trying to say or like what the work is that needs to happen, there's a lot of room for like confusion and just, I don't know, challenges like rework and things that can come up in the workplace that like it's not necessary, right? We can make it easier. And it again comes from not just trying to focus on, well, I don't want to be a micromanager, but instead, in order to be a good manager or in order to be a good coach or a good scrum master or, good anything, how do I be clear on my ideas? How do I be clear with people of like what I might need from them? Whether that's I need you to do this task or I need you to help like reach these results. Like there's a lot of different ways that we can look at it, but being mindful of that, I think is super important.
yeah, I like that. I like that to indeed think much more of that. And so, from what I understand from you, for you, the book from Cate Hudson helped with seeing that
Yep.
and knowing much more what is good. So that is again another book that I will put on my pile that you
Yeah.
convinced me that I want to read now immediately. Unfortunately, there is already a lot of big because I've been
I get that.
I've
I get that.
yeah, I have been, I read a lot, but at the same time, I've been publishing or recording and publishing one episode every week. So at least one book is added every week. Well, sometimes we talk about older books, but even there, the video that will go out next Friday, the books that were mentioned there was like, oh, maybe I should want to reread this again because that's an older book that I really loved. So even the books that I have read, I want to reread again. So
Yeah.
doesn't always help me to ask that question. But that said, it's a couple of years ago that I found that we had not that much books about agile leadership and engineering leadership, engineering managers, and it feels like the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, we have a lot more of these books, or at least I am discovering them, and I really like it. So really wonderful. I'll put that with my list to read. So the next question is for me one of the most interesting ones, especially again in conversations like this that go in all kinds of direction. What's a question that I didn't ask you, but you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Right. Man, I don't even know that I have the answer now, but I feel like the question is like, what are my hopes for the Agile community? Like again, kind of knowing your audience and sort of like thinking about, I know here in the US, there's been all kinds of changes of, a number of companies were letting go of their Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, making some changes in their technology organizations in particular. There's a lot happening on it. It's, I think, caused a lot of like turmoil across our community that I mean, I know for a while, it's like, I felt like if I opened up like LinkedIn, there's like a number of posts like, Agile is dead, or I'm looking for a new job, I was suddenly laid off, and a certain amount of like, you're not doing it right, you should be doing blah, blah, blah instead. And it was just really kind of like negative and disheartening. And it's, I think, been difficult, I think, for like as like a whole community, and even like on the individual level, just kind of like grapple with like, where are we right now? Like, what is happening? Because I think some of this in some ways is like we're seeing such change happening because Agile in a lot of ways has been successful. Of like, it is the typical way of working. Organizations have adopted it. People have gotten familiar enough with this that they're not needing as much like hand holding or like constant reminder or like that sort of like fundamental level support. Like, we've gone beyond that. I think there's different needs. And even like you said a moment ago, like, we're seeing more books coming out about like agile leadership. And like, I feel like there's more experience that's available in the community now. And we're seeing people that have transitioned roles and things that I hope that as a community, like, we're able to look and find those bright spots of, where are people using their skills and connecting with people in ways that are making a big difference within their organizations, but then also in their communities. Like, where are we, hearing about like the amazing agile companies that are doing things that are, just like so innovative and really delighting their customers. I feel like as a customer, I would like to be delighted a little bit more often with the apps and different products that I'm using. I almost like found myself wishing, it seems kind of funny, like I'm trying to get back into sort of like a meditation practice, and I find it so difficult. But I've been really successful at using Duolingo to relearn French and have like a streak of over 150 days. The part of me thought, man, if only my meditation app was as like persistent as Duolingo, if you would just like remind me multiple times a day, like not just that once a day reminder that I've scheduled, but like just keep at me, just like hit me so many times if I haven't done it, and then even a few more if I have done it. Like, force me to sit down and like be mindful, be in a meditative thought for like 5 minutes or so. Like, that'd be so nice. And probably pretty backwards on some level for like a meditation app to like.
I was about to say this because like annoying people and putting stress on not having meditated, that kind of feels the opposite.
What's taking me out of the flow of my meeting? Oh, my meditation app. Like, what's taking me out of the flow of my emails? My meditation app, right? I mean, I'm like, maybe there's something there. Someone can take that idea, run with it, and see if it goes anywhere. But I also think, again, like as like a agile community, like I think there's some pretty cool things even happening with like the sustainability movement, and agilists coming together and using their skills as facilitators to help groups in their local community come together and solve real environmental problems. That I think is so inspiring as well. So I think for all of us, like, what's my hope? Like, keep looking for the bright spots, keep producing the bright spots, and I think being open to that change of like, how do we continue to evolve and grow and find new ways perhaps of like using our skills and using our knowledge to help people.
I love the whole conversation that you said around that, because indeed all these discussions about agile is that the interesting part is that when I originally asked this question in the book version of Who's Agile in 2010, the answers, this question was in there as well, and this all the answers went in all kind of directions.
Yeah.
In the video version, it all goes around what's the future of agile in a certain form or another. So it feels like many people have all kind of ideas, reactions to it, and there is a team there. And I think this is I like it in a way because it allows people to think in a very open way about okay these kind of questions, and they're all a little bit different. It's not always is agile dead or it's
Right.
the future. It's they're all kind of nuances to it, which I really like, because that's how I like to think about agile in a way as well. That's it's not just one fixed thing that's all the same for everybody. Everybody has a certain flavor to it.
Yeah.
Some flavors I like more than others, but that's again that's the same with a lot of other things.
Right.
So thank you for bringing that your nuance or your answer to that.
Yeah.
Let's move to that next question. Who do you think I should ask next?
Zinat Fadwani. And folks might not be familiar
And
with
that
her.
might be, I hope is her, if I'm correct.
Yes. So Zinat and I met here in Dallas. She and I had an opportunity to work together and co-presented at some conferences. She has a lot of experience in organizations that are trying to scale Agile. And what I love is that she's seen it and experienced it and done it in multiple companies. So she really is pragmatic in her approach. There's not a one size fits all. You've got to recognize like what are the things that are going to help your company in particular, and like how do we work through that, and how do we train people up for new roles, or like new ways of working. She's a fantastic trainer. I was able to take one of her classes, and it was so engaging, and I just loved it. And the thing that I wanted to like really highlight with Zinat is, I met her here in Dallas, and she still comes and spends time here. But she moved back to Pakistan a couple of years ago. And the Pakistan Agile community is awesome. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to meet many of their folks, but I've connected with them
but
through
not
events.
that many. Yeah.
So much energy, so much heart, and they've done such a great job at like growing their community over the last decade. And I love that Zinat is now like supporting them and like helping to be a part of that community too. So she's been working with some companies in Pakistan to adopt agile ways of working, and that's a pretty big shift for them. There's a lot of traditional mindset and I think some more rigidity in how they've been operating. That she's done a fantastic job of like really working with them and helping them to see how a new way can help them be more effective. So I just had to give a shout out to Zinat. I would love to have her as a guest on here and hear her perspective on things.
That's a wonderful, what is it, marketing or publicity for her and for her country in a way. So I really thank you for that. It's interesting because in the beginning of the video series, I had a couple of people from Pakistan, and then somehow they all invited people from outside of their country, and now I'm glad to finally have someone again from Pakistan. So that is really nice to do that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I've noticed that I think almost every time I have one of the people who are part of the Women in Agile, that you do indeed have that network and invite people. And so I'm really, really glad for seeing that when you do that. Allison, we've been talking now for quite a while. It's been for me a wonderful evening, I guess for you afternoon. If people want to reach out to you, what's a good way to connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me.
This should be the link, and I will add it to the show notes, of course, as well. So yeah, there's only left for me to thank you for that time. It was a little bit shaky in the beginning with some technical difficulties, but I've noticed that things kept recording. So yeah, I'm really happy that we pushed through, and I love that conversation. So
yeah, me too. I was worried about, how hard would this be, going through so many questions, but I enjoyed it, and I'm again so grateful that you let me prepare in advance by sending those, so I had an idea of like what to expect and how to have good answers for your audience.
I love the answers as well. This is partially for me. This is of course a lot for the audience as well. But the main reason that I keep doing this for now more than 3 years is because I so love and I get so much energy out of conversations like this. That's why I keep pulling through, even in the technical difficulties we had in the beginning. For me, I just keep feeling that energy that's coming from Dallas, and then that really helps and makes it for me an enjoyable evening. So and what I've heard for most of my audience is that they like that as well, the fact that there is some connection, even if it's like in this case people who've never met in person, and just had some conversations over email to get this going. And like you say, indeed, part of the preparation, making sure that when you register, you get your questions. For me, it feels just the natural part of having a meeting, having some kind of thing, is giving that information as much. Everything I have, why shouldn't I share it? It helps you.
Right.
And the better you're prepared, or the more at ease you are, the nicer it is for me as well. So that makes it nice. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.